Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world, and welcome to this special General Conference Business Forum. I am Reverend Elder Rochelle Brown, interim moderator, and it's so good to have so many of you here at this hour. Want to note that this is being recorded, so it will be available for you to share with your church, to share with others, for lay delegates, as we get to a point of voting in just a short period of time, about 2 weeks now, and we are so glad that you were able to meet. I want to note that this is a special General Conference Business Forum, and we are glad you're here. This is the agenda for the forum today. We'll have a formal welcome here in a moment, an introduction of the people you see on your screen, and we'll have opening prayer. We'll go through the current assessment rate and schedule, some UFMCC bylaws as a reminder and greater awareness on church finances, a snapshot of MCC churches, assessments, what are agreements, restoration plans, a summary, talk about the upcoming vote, and we'll talk about the details of the vote, and of course we're going to answer questions all along the way. So one thing we will do is not only answer questions, but I want to introduce you to the panel, and we'll get to a bit of the process for this business forum today. So you'll notice some different faces and some new faces from the governing board here today. I'd like to welcome Christy, newly appointed member. And you see David, who's here as our treasurer. Miak is here, vice chair. Bob is also a new board member. And Marcia is a new board member. And Joe is here. Unfortunately, Victoria had a medical emergency to deal with this morning, and so she was unable to attend. And we keep her in our prayers, and she is greatly missed to be here today. So glad to have so many board members here. And we are very glad that you are all here. As I mentioned in process, this is a business forum, not a business meeting. And this business forum is in preparation for the vote, which is coming up on November 7th, U.S. time and date. And we are going to try to pause at the end of each slide to answer questions. So as we move through a slide, if there are questions, we're asking to the left of your screen, questions can be typed in this box. We'll answer as many as possible. And as we answer questions, if you type them, we'll try to provide an answer both in text and verbally, as able. If there is a time in which that we feel that we're not going to get to the end of our slides because of one slide having so many questions, we may move on, and if we're able to come back to some questions, we will, or answer them in a separate message when the video link goes out. Is sent out via email for people to access. So I hope that's helpful, and for all of you, and that we're able to be here together and discuss the very important topic of assessments and assessment rates together and provide you a wealth of information today. So as we begin, if we could, and I want to note that the questions on the left are for questions only, and the comments on the right are for comments only. If you agree with a question or you want to reiterate a question that's already been asked on the left, please use the comment box and not the question box. That way, when we're going through this, it's much easier for us to manage. And when I say us, it's not just the governing board receiving the questions. We have quite a few staff folks for staff support today, so a special thanks to Mike in IT, Jack in administration, Marina, who is our assessments liaison, and Linda in communications. So as we begin, let's open in a word of prayer, and Marcia Warren, can you help us get us started here in prayer this morning?
Can you hear me? There it goes.
Yes.
Good morning. Let us pray. Most gracious and merciful God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for our many blessings and our ability to be here together, to come together, and to move forward. We ask that you oversee this meeting, that you oversee our lives, and continue to bless this denomination. In your many names we pray. Amen.
Amen, and thank you. And I'm not going to do many of these slides. I just want to get us started with a little bit at the beginning, a few things in the middle. It'll be other governing board members speaking. What I want to do, since this is more of a staff-related issue of how did we get this assessment data, I want to present this one slide here, and hopefully this will help answer some questions. Over the years, MCC has used various methods of data collection. We've even had different databases across the years, but in the most recent time, there had been Excel and QuickBooks and other donor databases to gather and report assessments and donations. Early in 2017, we began building a not-for-profit version of the Salesforce database. Data entry began in late 2017 and continues as we update accuracy on a regular basis. Now, in the last few months, data from assessment reports have been entered, providing a snapshot of assessments received. Staff reductions over the last 8 years has really inhibited the staff ability to carefully track assessments. In part of the staff changes, just a few months ago in August, the assessment liaison position was formed to follow up on assessments received and reestablish contact with local churches. So there is now a dedicated staff person and a robust database. We are carefully and prayerfully moving in the right direction to ensure accountability and accuracy. The data we present today is as accurate as we have received and have been able to enter into the database. We feel confident in what we've presented, and it's very, very important that you know that we are entering data. The work of the last few months, which has been very intense and very good work from the staff, it allows us to provide the following snapshot of assessments received so far in 2018. We will admit that majority of our data is U.S.-based. We are receiving more and more global data. We're entering into the database. We're working on our processes in receiving reports globally and receiving assessments globally. And that will be discussed further on in the webinar today. But I wanted you to know where this data is coming from, how it's been collected, where it is. It's a confidential database. There are only very few staff people who have access to this, and we want to assure you of this and let you know how hard we're working for accuracy. And so now I'm going to hand this over to Joe.
Thank you, Rochelle. So on this slide, we're talking about the current General Conference approved affiliated church assessment rate. Currently in 2018, we are at 11.5%, and beginning January 1st of 2019, we are scheduled to go to 11%. And these rates and the decrease in them by a half percentage point each year was based on a 2013 General Conference vote and approval.
Miak, you're muted. If you can unmute, please.
Yeah, I just unmuted. Based on the UFMCC bylaws, Chapter 9, Section B1, reporting. Each emerging church and affiliated church shall report all church receipts each month to the UFMCC, and with that report shall remit a percentage of the funds reported as determined by General Conference. Any money transferred permanently or for long term from any exempt fund into the general fund must be added to the income figures for that month and assessments paid on them. Report and remittance are due to the UFMCC on or before the 10th day of the month following the month being reported.
You may have noticed in that bylaw that it mentions emerging churches and affiliated churches. And the governing board has looked at this bylaw And we have done a little research looking back at when emerging churches was added to the bylaws. And we note that at this time, General Conference has only voted on assessment rates for affiliated churches. Since the General Conference has never voted on an assessment rate for emerging churches, the 10% assessment rate is only a request. The governing board is working with UFMCC staff and emerging church leaders to recommend an assessment rate for vote at the next General Conference. Also being discussed are assessment credits offered when partnership agreements are created between affiliated and emerging churches. This was an important thing that we noted when reading the bylaws and went back and did some research to find that the voting has never mentioned emerging churches having a different rate than affiliated churches. And we recognize the burden of an emerging church, and we look forward to working with emerging church leaders and the partner churches in what would be a reasonable way of assessing emerging churches. Just for your information, 3 out of 13 emerging churches gave $3,331.80 between January and August of 2018. So it's important for you all to know that many but not all are able to give, and we're going to work with them, and this is the part of the next conversation we need to have regarding emerging churches, the bylaws, and assessment rates. And Joe?
So this slide has a breakdown of affiliated and emerging churches around the world, which truly reflects the global community that we are. We have 154 affiliated churches in MCC, 3 in Africa, 3 in Asia, 7 in Australia and New Zealand, 3 in Canada, 11 in Europe, 13 Ibero-America, and 114 in the U.S. In emerging congregations, we have 3 in Africa, 2 in Asia, 1 in Australia, New Zealand, 6 in Europe, 34 in Ibero-America, and 13 in the U.S. And one of the questions that has just been posted is NEMA MCC is an affiliated church in Kenya, and we have been sending in the 10% rate the past 2 years. Stan, we appreciate your comment, and we'll make note of that. Thank you so much. Good question, Diane. How long is a church considered emerging? And Rochelle has replied, until reaching affiliated status, and I'm sure there is a timeline and process involved in that, and it would be helpful for us to communicate that as a follow-up to this webinar. I think we can go on to the next slide.
Snapshot church assessments from January to August 2018. Okay, right now, folks, we have, when you look at the assessment rate overview, you have approximately 57% churches give at the General Conference approved rate of 11.5. We have 3 churches that give a 12, 1 a 13. It is important to note that 35% of our churches give less than 10%. Of those, about 25 of our churches give 5% or less of monthly income as an assessment. Now, this is not any recriminations or anything. This is just based on the data. And so a lot of these churches have genuine reasons. Some of them have genuine reasons why they are unable to give more due to the financial crisis that they may find themselves in. Church size and assessment rates. Nearly 68% of our churches have less than 200 members. Majority of our churches given a full assessment rate have less than 200%. 3 of the 10 churches has over 200 members give at the full assessment rate. So that means out of our 10 largest churches, 3 of them currently give at the current assessment rate. Now, when we take a look at our cash received, we're not talking about the spreadsheet that is sent in the reports. We're talking about actual remittances that have been turned in. Our global assessments received from January to August 2018 was $493,643 US. In the US only, in that same period, we received $471,881. All of these numbers are in US dollars. Churches given at 8% to 10%, 8% to less than a percent made up $82,537.89. Churches given at a 13 to 10% rate is $389,343. As I said before, local churches' income may be impacted by attendance, storm, flood, holidays, local building projects, multiple reasons, and this will lead to lower amounts of remittances. Now, this spreadsheet pretty much gives you from the January to 2018, where we know we have accurate data. It gives a breakdown of the various percentages in which churches give. You'll see where the churches that give 13 to 12%, they bought in $16,895. At 11.5 rate, we got $337,000, almost $200 there. 11%, $17,253. 10.5, we had one church that bought in at $3,150. The 10% rate, we had 4 churches that bought in $36,000. The 8 to 5% range, we bought in $44,000, $292,000, and it goes on. And then we see how many churches give at less than 1%, and it breaks this down. Are there any questions? Is this clear? Or any comments? Yes, Wes. These numbers are based on what is reported. So we rely solely on what the churches tell us that is going on. We have no other way of independently verifying or auditing this. The next slide we have here is it pretty much gives the breakdown of the percentage of the number of churches that give at the various rates. Between the 13 to 12%, we got 3 churches. 11.5, we have 64 churches. 11%, we have 2 churches. 10.5, 1. 10%, 4. 8 to 5%, we have 11. 4.5% to 1%, we have 15. Less than 1%, we have 7. And then we have 6 churches that give 0. And we have actually, sorry, five churches that give 0. And we have no idea in those churches what's happening because we generally don't have reports or anything to back that up. So they have basically gone silent and dark on us. Okay, we're looking at the snapshot of cash received by assessments. And again, this is just for January 2018 to August 2018, where we can accurately say, yes, this is what we have. Nearly 25% of the U.S. churches are not current with their current assessments and reports. That when I say assessments here, folks, I'm talking about cash. The report is a so between all of that, I have 25% of our churches, U.S. churches, not reporting either what they are to paying or not paying whatsoever, or they're behind. Restoration of non-paying U.S. churches in 2018 would add approximately about $60,000 of to this year's income, and this is based on a projection of the 2017 given data. And when we say restoration, we talk about making agreements and agreeing to a plan that will bring them current. Okay, I'm reading Liz's question here. It says, when you are talking about 25% U.S. church in U.S. not being current or reporting, how many of these agreements in place to pay less than the than not paying? Okay, I think what Liz is asking is of this, how many of them are in agreement of paying less than the assessment rate? So if we go back to that earlier slide, I'd say probably to 7, 15, 22, 11. So take 25% of about 15, 30, about 37, about 9 or something like that, Liz, roughly. I can get you that number later. Okay. Back to what we're saying. Yeah, Restoration of Churches snapshot. Churches from various nations submit assessments and reports quarterly, semi-annual, or annually, depending on the nation, and this depends on what rules are in place, various tax laws from different countries, and how they need to report that, and how they transfer money to UFMCC. Okay. Catherine, I will read out the answers as soon as I finish this slide, and I'll come straight back to the answers. Is that okay? Okay. Assessment reports and records from outside the U.S. include deposit records and local in-country bank accounts. In a few cases, the exchange rate from local currencies, U.S. dollars, is so low, sending assessments is unrealistic. In these instances, funds are held in escrow in the local nation. Example, like in Kenya, South Africa, Brazil, the Philippines, Uganda. When you look at our monthly P&L, you'll see that we reflect income only when the funds and reports are received from global accounts. We don't report it any other time because when we do that, it basically creates an accounting nightmare to actually get through, because with the reports not be here, we reflect that as a negative number on the P&L. So let me get back to the answers that were there. Let me scroll up here. Sorry, 1 second. Answers, Catherine. Okay. In answer to Liz's question, Rochelle responded, some have agreements, some do not. The issue is that nearly 25% are not current. Jean Huttle asked, at the last meeting, as I recall, someone said, how can a church give 10% if a congregation is given less than 5%? That makes no sense to me. It seems if a person gives $1, 10% of $1 is 10 cents. That's an On the exaggerated example, the point is, where is the accountability? If your collection is $100 a week or $10,000 a week, the answer to that, Gene, is that a lot of our churches are struggling even to pay their pastors or even to keep the lights on. And in this current financial crisis, I understand that it seems unfair, but we still have to remember that we're still a church and we are a community. So if one of our members or a number of our members are having difficulties, we should try and help them get back to wholeness. Next slide, please. Okay, this is Joe. This is yours, right?
Yes,
Restoration plan. Yep.
right. Okay, thank you, David. So we're going to take a little bit of time to review our governing policy 16 assessment payments and our process in seeking renewed relationships through agreements. So the purpose of this policy was to address the implications of non-payment of assessments on a church's affiliation status and to clarify the relationship between the governing board and staff implementation of assessment collection procedures. The policy is basically that each emerging and affiliated church shall report to MCC its weekly worship attendance and contribute a financial assessment in order to support the global ministry of MCC. The assessment rate and period for reporting and payment are determined by the General Conference. When a church is unable or unwilling to submit its report and or contribute its assessments in a timely manner, MCC will implement the assessment compliance process as established by the governing board in the UFMCC bylaws, Article 9, under church finances. All churches that are in compliance with an agreed restoration plan become eligible for forgiveness of arrears to enable them to move forward in good relationship with the denomination. Forgiveness of unpaid assessments for a church that has become at least 6 months behind on reporting and paying assessments at the rate established by General Conference will only be considered if that church has accepted support from the denomination and has complied with its restoration plan. So this again expresses the value of the mutual relationship. If a church neglects to report and pay assessments monthly and to communicate with MCC staff about its non-reporting and or non-payment for 6 months or more, the church will be deemed non-compliant with the denomination affiliation criteria and certain measures will be taken. Possible measures may include failure to seat the church's lay delegates at General Conference or to seat the church's clergy delegates at General Conference. Continued noncompliance may result in additional measures such as non-renewal of clergy licensure for the church's senior pastor and or suspension of the church affiliation status. Decisions regarding these measures will be carried out in line with UFMCC bylaws and the MCC Ministry Leader Code of Conduct, and as such will be implemented by the appropriate member or body of staff, senior leadership, council of elders, and the governing board. The bottom line in all of this is that we want to be in relationship with our congregations. We want everyone to be moving toward that wholeness that David referenced before. And we want to understand where churches are realistically and financially, and work together to strengthen us as a body called MCC.
The payment status of U.S. churches. When you look here, you'll see that we have approximately 14% of the churches have signed agreements. We have 7% of our churches in the US that we're talking about are in process of signing agreements. And we have 57% of those. These are the churches that we have agreements with. 57% of those are up for renewal. And then we have 22% of those churches setting lower than current assessment rate with no agreement in place. We're working to eliminate the yellow area of the pie chart, that 22%, to bring it to 0%, that we know exactly what's what. Now, somebody clear from Divine Peace has asked a question which is somewhat important. Are there churches withholding their assessment in protest? Yes, there are a couple. However, one of the things I'd like to point out is that I'll give the analogy. We're all trying to row in a boat in a certain direction. When assessments are withheld, it's like drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat, and then you're letting water in. So now we have to focus then on bailing the water out and keep moving in a direction. By withholding assessments, it's a protest, but it's only hurting the denomination in the long run. It doesn't help the problem. It doesn't help resolve the problem. It creates more problems. And a lot of times when these assessments are withheld, we are not informed until our assessment liaison or myself or somebody from the denomination gets in contact with the church in question, and only to be told, oh, we're holding our assessments in escrow, or we're not paying them in protest. That is not the agreement that we all had when we entered affiliation status. And yes, it may be argued that, well, you're not getting answers. Well, we have been trying since I've entered the board to try and get answers to folks as quickly as I possibly can. This is a thorny issue and it needs more discussion, but I just wanted to acknowledge that question from Claire. Are there any questions on this slide? Then moving on to the next slide, please. We have, in the US, we have 24 US affiliated churches that are currently 6 months behind on their assessments. Of those, 17 of them have not sent an assessment in 2018. The governing board is currently actively engaging with these churches and offering restoration plans or creating new plans where possible. And if they are not when we say the governing board, we do this through thanks to staff efforts to reach out and talk to these folks, because sometimes we know that we approach this so that you don't feel that all that pressure that we're trying to beat you up or anything. So that's why we have staff initially reach out and try and work with these churches to get them back into a current status with their assessment. Any questions? On the next slide, please. So in summary, our income equation remains reliant on the U.S. assessments from U.S. affiliated churches, meaning we conduct our business, we keep the lights on, the doors open, and try to conduct as much programs as we possibly can based on what we receive from the assessments or the income from U.S. churches, U.S. affiliated churches. Our restoration plans assist affiliated churches in meeting their assessment obligations. Our general operational budget will significantly improve in 2018 as churches send their send either the general conference agreed upon assessments or meet the agreed restoration plans. So we survive and we move forward and we succeed based on the cooperation of everyone. It's not just a one church or one person show. It's for all of us. If we are going to actually do this, we need everyone to help and participate as much as they possibly can. Some observations from our general operating budget. Churches given below full assessment rate increase given by 2%. We'll actually had approximately $75,000 in our 2018 income. And this number is affected by church size. Churches currently paying 8% or less increase given by 2% would mean the overall 2018 budget or income would increase by approximately $60,000. And again, this is impacted by church size. But what we're saying, if you're paying 8% and you give 2% more, we actually had about $60,000 to the income for 2018, and that will help significantly in the restoration of something I think a lot of people are listening up for is the designated funds to make sure they're restored and try and save some money and continue to operate in the black. In August, we had our first month in months where we were in a surplus. It wasn't much, but it was $1,000+, but it was a difference. I like seeing that number. It was black instead of red. So if we continue to move in this way, we should be in much better shape than when we started out with. Next slide, please. The impact of the overall rate change. If we go from 11.5 to 11%, is it small enough where we can make some expense adjustments and cover the impact? A reduction from 11.5% to 10% will equal to about approximately $18,000 less in annual giving based on the 2017 cash received through our assessments. When we look ahead to 2019, more churches given according to the new assessment rate in 2019, whether 11% or 10%, will create a positive impact on the denomination. Okay. This is Miak, I think this is you.
Yes, this is my slide. Yes. So the motion today is presented for the special general conference vote that the general conference will adopt a 10% assessment rate for affiliated churches with present deductions remaining intact. The next slide, please. The special general conference voting details. Voting will open on 7th of November 2018 with a 48-hour window to vote. If the motion carries by a 2/3 majority, it will be adopted on 1st of January 2019. If the motion does not carry, then the current assessment rate and schedule will continue at 11.5% for the remainder of 2018 and reduce to 11% on 1st of January 2019. Delegates registered to participate in this survey do not need to re-register to vote on 7th of November 2018. You will receive an email with a new link and password on 5th of November 2018. If you have questions about your registration status, contact information technology manager Mike Hath at mikehathy@mccchurch.net.
This is Rochelle here. I apologize, my video is not working, but I am still here. We have had some comments and some questions come up, and we have time for questions, and we thank you all, and we can go back to different slides if we need to with some assistance from Mike. getting us there. Want to reiterate that the bylaws say if someone is non-compliant, it turns to the governing board policy. In the back, the policy has a may and not a shall. And the way that previous governing boards have enacted the policy has had the may leaning towards the lay delegates not being seated. Now, we want to say very clearly that it was very intentional of the governing board this summer for the special general conference to not consider non-payment of assessments as making you ineligible to vote. This was a very careful decision and a very clear decision by the board at the time, because this is about assessment rates. We did not want anyone who is unable to pay or who was working to create an agreement to find themselves unable to vote on a topic related to assessments. So this was clear for the special general conference at this time, and so it was very important for us to make that known. That will not be the case for General Conference. For General Conference, we will follow the bylaws and we will follow the governing board policy. We're going to not make exceptions. We're going to actually follow the policy. And in the policy, this is a policy that existed in 2016. There has been no change to the governing board policy regarding this. This was something that existed then. We are going to be exploring the role of partner churches and giving and all of these things as we look at the results of this this vote, because going down to 10% would have an impact, and we want to look at that more clearly, and we want to do that in conversation with staff and emerging church leaders and partner churches. And that is something that is very important to answer the questions about new rate passing and how will the partner church giving continue with a lower rate. I think it's extremely important that we support our emerging churches, because as you saw in the church numbers, we have nearly 60 emerging churches. That makes a big difference in the size of MCC when you look at the number of affiliated churches at nearly 160. So that is a very large percentage of emerging churches, people who wish to become affiliated MCC churches, and the ways we support them and partner with them matters. And local church partnerships are valuable and invaluable to those groups beginning. So this is an important issue. We look forward to any bylaw proposals that may come from the board or from others. The board is exploring a bylaw proposal that would include emerging churches and what their assessment rate could be or should be as we continue that to be brought forward at General Conference. There may be others that have better ideas, and we're open to those. We are also wanting to be as clear as possible with how people give, and we're going to work very intentionally about clear dates and eligibility and all of these things through our governance committee. And once again, Victoria said she couldn't be here today to discuss that. But as the governance committee continues and the board continues to work, we'll be releasing details about eligibility for voting for General Conference based on the bylaws and the governing board policy. So any other questions, people are willing to type questions on the left and comments on the right. Is there an official position from the governing board? It seems that reducing immediately to 10% may be too drastic a reduction to handle reasonably. The governing board does not take an official position. All we can do is provide impact statements. The governing board follows the wish of the General Conference. The assessment rates are set by the General Conference, and we are simply providing you numbers based on what we can estimate based on 2017, and we look at that, and it's our best to answer. And I believe I answered the rate about if the new rate passes, how much will partner churches be giving to fellowship versus what they give to emerging church partner. We're going to have to negotiate that because every agreement is annually negotiated. And if the motion does pass, we're going to have to work with that with the board and the staff. And we're going to work directly with emerging church leaders and partner churches to determine that. So I hope those two answers, Scott. were answered. And there's other questions being typed. We do have time for questions. We can also send questions to the governing board if questions do come up. I want to really clearly say that this will be available for you in a PDF when we release the video, and we really encourage you to share this with your churches. I know some of your churches have congregational meetings coming up before the vote. Even if you don't, please share this and make this available. Can the screen with a specific motion be shown again, please, and thank you? Yes. That's beyond this one, going the wrong direction. There we go. And someone else is typing a question, so we'll pause. Thanks for updating the info regarding emerging churches. The work of governance is always discovery. And in the work of governance, we discover that there are spaces that we may need to clarify. And one of these is assessments regarding emerging churches. So thank you for the patience. The question is, shouldn't we be considering the impact of the difference between 11 and 10% because the current rate will change, will be 11, not 11.5? Yes, absolutely. And when we look at this, going back to that slide, it's a very small rate. A 0.5 is small enough for some simple expense adjustments. That is one thing. But what happened when there was a call for the Assessment Commission recommended, we had a survey, and the survey led to a 10% for vote. That's why we're discussing the reduction from 11.5 to 10%, because that was the result of the survey just a few months, I think maybe a month and a half ago. And so that's why we're considering this particular percentage rate based on a survey of the General Conference. And that's why the 10% is going to a vote. And so it's a yes-no vote regarding 10%. And more information on the voting is here. And once again, if you're a lay delegate or a clergy person, do keep Mike Hassi's email address close by. You should be receiving an email on November 5th. U.S. date, it would be the 6th globally. And please do make sure that you put on your calendar to look for that link in spam and everywhere to find that link. Make sure you have it. And if you don't, to contact Mike to ensure you have the link to vote. And someone else is typing a question, so we'll pause. We realize it goes a little bit slower.
Okay, Rochelle, I just saw Joan from North Carolina in Asheville, I think, is suggesting that if we don't have anything more on our plates, we could do a campaign saying what the denomination does globally, because a lot of folks within the MCC do not have any experience with a global denomination. They just had an independent church or non-denominational church.
Thank you for that, and I will pass. Linda Brenner, Communications, is here, and I think this is very important and a very important thing for us to consider. And yes, there is a 48-hour window because we have a global time frame. It's important for us to provide that 48 hours to give as many people as possible 24 hours to vote. And when you do the calculations around the world, it makes a difference. And for people who may be traveling or have other things come up. We did change it to the 7th because it was a voting day on the 6th. We had considered the 6th, but we know a lot of folks in the U.S. will already be voting in their local elections. So we made sure it would be the 7th into the 8th. We usually do voting on Tuesday as well. It's an interesting habit we have. There's a question. To ask another way, what is 1% of denominational tithing? That is really the amount of money which is at stake in this vote, which would help us understand the financial impact of 10% to 11%. Wes, thank you for that question, number one, and I believe that we can provide that based on 2017 numbers, and we are willing to write that in a different way. We believe that number $18,000 would be appropriate, but I want to double check it in the way you're writing it and have our really smart folks that are on the finance committee and the governing board that do these number crunches do that, rather than I believe we did that, but I'll let them go back and double check that we did that. That was on a previous slide, but we're willing to look at that and provide that answer with the release of the video. Yes, and sometimes when asking these questions, we're trying to say it inside and out, and we want to provide an inside and out answer.
So it's the answer to that question. Any way we cut it, it's going to be approximately $18,000 difference based on the given of 2017, and that's a conservative estimate.
Thank you, David. That's why you're the treasurer. Are there any other questions that, what would the impact of that change on UFMCC activities? Actually, when you consider our budget, this does have an impact, and David, I can let you do that as treasurer to answer the impact that would be.
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing. It means me juggling a whole lot of expenses. I call it in biblical terms, I'll now be robbing all 12 apostles to pay Judas at this point, because it's doing a whole lot of juggling to get it. It actually makes an impact because at this point our staffing levels are at exactly bare bones. There is not much to cut anywhere. We have cut down on our travel expenses, and it would mean a whole lot of fundraising. And honestly, it would just, on a physical nature, just have my blood pressure up a few more points, but it would have a significant impact.
I'll give some actual expenses, maybe, since we're working on the 2019 budget. Completing audits that we need to complete would cost, $15,000 to $20,000 to $25,000 for a variety of audits. They're not cheap. And so when we look at the cost of audits as a very basic thing that needs to happen as part of our needs as a legal obligations as an organization, it could equal that, just to give an idea. There are many other expenses we can consider for participation, but if I take it just from an operational and not a programmatic answer, an operational answer would be that concrete. Programmatically, we would have to adjust some programs. We're not going to adjust staff. We actually reduce staff to a rate that considered the 10% option, so that the adjustments made in July considered a 10% assessment rate, because we wanted to be very careful. An update on selling the Sarasota building would help, which would help the financial bottom line. Yes, we decided to, earlier this year, the market bottomed out once again, and we now have a person leasing the building. We are considering all options regarding it, and that is something that the full board, now that we're a full board with appointment, are going to consider with a lease in place, what our options may be between now and the end of the year. So we will provide an update on any decisions regarding the Sarasota property. Options would, of course, remain selling the building. And what would that mean? But once again, that's something that will be addressed, and we will send further information out about that once we make those decisions. We're grateful for everyone who could participate today. I see that we're staying within our 1-hour time frame. We'll send out these charts, and we look forward to people looking at them carefully, being aware. We were intentional to not name specific churches that give it certain rates. We believe it's important that that people understand what rates, and that every church is particular in their needs, and we do really want to work with churches because we realize that things have changed for some churches. Others, they're giving above and beyond. They're doing generous in faith, above 11.5% as they're able, but we do want to be very clear that we understand that some people have challenges, and we want to be clear and cautious. A restoration plan is a temporary adjustment. It's not permanent. And so we do revisit those plans, and we are willing to work with people in their particular contexts. And I see people typing, so thank you all for what you've been doing here. Bob, since you are still here, would you be able to close us in prayer?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Almighty and loving God, we are grateful for this time to spend with each other. We thank you for all who have participated, who have joined us. We ask for your continued blessings and guidance as we anticipate and discern the difficult decisions ahead for our denomination and our congregations, so that we may be able to continue to do your work and your will. We thank you for all you have provided to us and will continue to provide. As we leave this forum, it is our continued prayer to open our hearts, our minds, and our spirits to remember that with you, all things are possible. In your many names we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, appointed board, and now the full board, for being here today, and for the staff for assistance, and all of you for attending. Look forward to you receiving the video, the link, and the documentation, and sharing with your churches as we continue to respond to your questions. Blessings.